Super excited to be here today with Dr. Matthew Lederman. Now, Dr. Lederman is a board-certified internal medicine physician who specializes in reversing disease using nutrition and lifestyle medicine. He helped create the lifestyle improvement program used in the private medical center that he co-founded called Transition to Health, as well as for the Whole Foods Market medical and wellness centers. He was featured in the film Forks Over Knives, and he co-authored the New York Times bestseller, The Forks Over Knives Plan, The Forks Over Knives Family, and Keep It Simple, Keep It Whole. Most recently, he has co-authored the Whole Foods Diet and the Whole Foods Cookbook, and helped develop the WholeFoodsDiet.com website. Dr. Lederman currently serves as the Vice President of Medical Affairs for Whole Foods Market, overseeing the Whole Foods Market Medical and Wellness Centers and the Whole Foods Market Whole Health Plan, along with other health and wellness projects. This man is a machine, and we are very excited to have him here today. So thanks so much for being here today with us, Dr. Lederman.
Thanks. Is there any time to talk after that introduction?
No, that's it. It's a great interview. Thank you so much. A lot to read here. So let's start at the top. We can talk about a lot of things today, but let's start talking about food in particular. Then we're going to kind of move on to a little sort of psychology as well. As far as the food is concerned, there's a lot of confusion when it comes to the necessity of using vegetable oil and coconut oil in prepared meals. In particular, we're talking about olive oil and coconut oil because all over the internet, people are saying to use olive oil and coconut oil because they're health-promoting foods. Can you give us some information here about the pros and the cons of using vegetable oil and coconut oil in cooking?
Yes, so you're going to hear this throughout our time together today. I really simplify things, and I think sometimes people think it's more complicated and it makes it harder to stick with it. And I think it makes it more confusing, but it's actually quite simple and the evidence is quite clear. If you take a food, a whole plant food, and you extract anything from it and eat that in its concentrated form. So if you take all of the carbohydrate out of a food and turn it into sugar, for example, or you take all of the protein out of a food and you make isolated protein powders, or you take all the fat out of the food and make an oil, you're extracting sort of a single macronutrient and leaving all the good stuff behind. And when you take something, it also is out of balance and not in that natural protective wrapper that you get from the whole food, and it causes health problems. So we all know problems with sugar or basically concentrated refined carbohydrates, isolated protein powders, increase your insulin-like growth factors, they're hard on the bones and the kidneys and the liver. There's clearly problems when you eat isolated protein powders versus getting your protein in the natural food. And the same thing with oils. If you take oil, whether it's coconut oil or any vegetable oil, you're getting a concentrated blast of calories. Whether it can have impacts on the immune system, it increases people with skin issues, acne. I mean, they can see problems get a flare up from that. There's just a whole host of issues that you want to avoid by eating the whole plant food. So if you're going to get fat, you can get more or less fat depending on the type of whole plant foods you eat. So eat them, but just eat them in their whole form. Same thing with the protein, same thing with the carbohydrate, eat it in its whole form. Coconut oil, just as an aside, people think is this, I don't know why, the magical health elixir. They come up with the medium chain triglycerides, they come up with the antimicrobial. I mean, when you look at the evidence, it doesn't support that. And the harms are very clear on what it does to everything from your cholesterol to your weight. And you just want to avoid that stuff. So if you're going to eat coconut, eat it in its whole form. And if you're going to take coconut oil, you can put it anywhere in your body except in your mouth. So you can rub it on your skin, you can rub it on anything you want, just don't eat. And that's the bottom line. It's pretty clear though.
What actually does happen to your cholesterol level? How much is it going to elevate over what period of time? And what happens to people who try to lose weight when they have oil in their diet?
So when you add oil into your diet, you increase the calorie density of your food significantly. And calorie density is the amount of stretch you get for a certain amount of calories of a type of food. Very low when you're eating a whole plant-based food, and it's very high when you're eating something like oil. Oil is 4,000 calories per pound, whereas vegetables are 100 calories per pound. So for every pound of food, imagine the stretch you get when you eat a pound of something in your stomach. You're going to get, for that same stretch, you're going to get either 4,000 calories or as little as 100 calories. And you can imagine over time, you're going to keep accumulating calories, which accumulates body weight and fat. So does that make sense as far as what's going to happen to your weight when you eat the oil? And then the cholesterol, you can do a test by yourself. I mean, whether you're eating coconut oil or vegetable oil, if you've been eating oil for a while, take your cholesterol and then your blood test, and then remove all the oil from your diet, and you'll see a difference in yourself. I mean, we'll have people that are even vegan, and you put them on an oil-free diet, and their cholesterol will drop significantly. So there's studies that show this. There's people, the doctors talk about this, but if you're not sure, do a study on yourself and keep everything else the same. And you're going to wind up probably eating a little bit more of the food because you're getting rid of so many calories when you get rid of the oil. But keep the foods overall the same and do a study on yourself. And we tell patients to do that. And they're always shocked when they see how significantly it drops. But you got to get rid of all the oil for a set period of time and then retake the blood testing.
Yeah. So if somebody did want to do this experiment, what is that set period of time?
It depends what you're willing to try. So at least ideally a week, but the longer you do it, the more impactful the results will be. But just make sure before you fall, what's going to happen is you're going to try and replace that. Don't just try and get rid of the oil and just say, oh, well, I used to saute vegetables and now I don't know how to saute, so I'm just not going to eat sauteed vegetables. You want to learn how to saute the vegetables with non-oil cooking methods. So ideally you learn how to brown your onions differently. You don't just stop eating browned onions. But do that for a period of time, you're going to see that you're going to see those changes. So if it gets to the point where you're saying, hey, after 2 weeks, I want to do it for a month, but after 2 weeks, I got to have oil, then check your blood work after 2 weeks and you'll see a difference.
Got it. Okay. So another hot topic in the world of diabetes health is the glycemic index and glycemic load. So how important is the glycemic index and glycemic load for people living with diabetes?
So I would never look at that scale. I would not use it. I think it's a waste and it's confusing. Some people talk about it in the plant-based world and they say pick lower glycemic, fruits and vegetables. But if you're fixing the problem, you don't need to do that. If you fix the fat problem, the intracellular fat that's causing the insulin not to function properly, the insulin receptors, you don't care if one food has a little bit higher glycemic load or index than another food, because ultimately your insulin is going to be working fine, your insulin receptors are going to be working fine, and you're going to be able to manage the glycemic load of any of those foods. And that's really what you want to do. You want to fix the system. Whereas what we're doing when we limit glycemic load, but we don't fix the fat issue, is we have a problem where we have a broken system and we're just trying to decrease the load on that broken system versus fixing the system. And then that load is actually not heavy, no matter whether it's a low or a high glycemic fruit and vegetable. The key is, though, you want it to be a whole food. So, and then it's even more confusing, right? When you look at the glycemic index with ice cream and you add foods like that compared to plant, it's just completely confusing. So again, I simplify. If you want to get rid of your diabetes, go whole foods, plant-based. Eat whole foods, don't process the foods. And get rid of the processed foods and sort of processed support foods like the oils. And then everything else is going to work fine. And you don't need to worry yourself any more than that. And don't confuse yourself more than that. Don't make it more complicated.
Okay, very clear. Now, you co-authored the Whole Foods Diet with John Mackey and your wife, Dr. Lona Polday. And in that book, you have a chapter called The Caveman Cometh, Promises and Pitfalls of the Paleo Diet. So can you give us a summary of why you don't recommend a paleo diet?
Well, it's funny. I've gotten sort of softer, if you will, over the years. It's not that I don't recommend like a paleo diet compared to the American diet is probably a healthier diet. I think the paleo diet is based on misinformation. That there was one diet, that we know about from that time ago, and it was all this, all these animal products. That to me, I think is misleading. But it makes it sort of fun and exciting to sort of learn about and think about now. So people are, it's sort of trendy to talk about it and do it. But if you, got rid of dairy and you ate all those vegetables and you decreased your animal product intake, which in theory should happen, you're going to be going in the right direction. But I think that it's misleading to say that eating, wild game is important for your health. I don't think the data supports that. So I think that they sort of they take some good information, they package it up kind of, inaccurately, and then they sort of take it to an extreme that I don't think that the data supports. So and that to me is what's confusing. And then when people start to get better compared to the plant-based to American diet, then everybody's really confused, right? Because it's like, well, why might cholesterol improve? And why did this happen? See, I do need to eat and then what they take home is, yeah, you do need to eat that, wild game. And you do need to, that to me is what starts to confuse people. And it's not that confusing. And what you guys teach is very simple and clear. That's what people need to hold on to.
Okay. So I think I already know the answer to your question here, but the ketogenic diet. It's a big deal. Especially in the world of diabetes, people are constantly bombarded with this idea that the ketogenic diet is their solution. It's their solution to short-term health. It's their solution to long-term health. And the ketogenic diet is founded upon the principle that you minimize your carbohydrate intake to like 30 grams per day or less, and
right.
You're eating a lot more, protein and fat-heavy foods. And if they come from the animal world, so be it. What's your take on that? How does that factor into diabetes, heart disease, and chronic disease in general?
Right. So here's the problem. You take someone with a broken sort of insulin system, and if you give them carbohydrates, they're already spilling sugar into the bloodstream, right? Glucose in the bloodstream. So you give them carbohydrate, that number is going to look even worse than if you didn't give them carbohydrate. So okay, great. So now everybody the take-home message from that is eat less carbohydrate. But what I say, it doesn't do anything for the broken system. So what I'll tell people to do is fix the broken system, which again is that fat issue. It's the animal product issue that if you decrease the animal products and all the processed food full of the processed fats, and you cure the broken insulin system, and then you can eat any foods you want, no matter what their carbohydrate load is, as far as plant-based foods. You don't have to limit the carbs at that point. And what I worry about is you're giving them a solution that not only reverses diabetes, but is consistent with the evidence on how you protect yourself from heart disease and cancer and strokes, right? So you already have a system that reverses diabetes and gets rid of the foods that causes those other problems. So even if a ketogenic diet helped diabetics fix the insulin system, which it really doesn't, you're still what you're using to fix the diabetes is still using foods that clearly are connected with heart disease and cancer and strokes and all these other problems. So why would you even consider going down that route if you can go down this route that is clearly safer and as effective, but you and I know it's actually more effective. Does that make sense? I think to me there's like this common sense sort of step back and say, it's one thing if what you guys were teaching didn't work. I'd be like, oh, well, let's go look at the ketogenic diet because, Robbie and Cyrus' system doesn't work. But we have a system that cures diabetes and it doesn't put you at risk for these other diseases. It actually protects or reverses them. So to me, it's like, stop looking at that point.
That's exactly right. Yeah. And I think you hit it on the head when you talked about the fact that there's, you have this broken glucose metabolism to begin with that is insulin resistance that caused type 2 diabetes. And you have a choice. Either you fix that system and then make it so that your carbohydrate tolerance goes up once again, or you choose to avoid carbohydrate altogether and keep your system broken at all times. I think it's a brilliant way to think about it. It's fantastic.
And you're keeping your system broken and you're making these numbers. They're not even, they say, oh, well, they'll look a little better, but ultimately they still look terrible. So it's like, okay, I'm sure you guys know the diabetics that when they are on the conventional system with, hypoglycemic medications, they still were shooting all over the place, and their still sugars, it's not like their sugars look great then anyway. So to me, it was like, it's this whole idea that doesn't even work, and it uses foods that put you at such high risk for other issues. And it's like, again, it's so much more complicated than it has to be. It's really confusing. And then you have all these people that are confused because they don't know about these nuances. And it's just terrible. You guys make it so clear. That's what people need. And then they need to learn how to do it.
Got it. Okay. So, hopefully people are not confused at this point, but just in case they are, let's make them more confused. Okay. There's a lot of confusion when it comes to fat soluble vitamins, because there are some experts on the internet who say that in order to absorb a sufficient amount of the fat soluble vitamins A, D, E, and K, that it's necessary to make sure that you're eating high fat foods at a meal where the A, D, E, and K vitamins are present. So a lot of people are saying, okay, I'm going to go eat a bunch of nuts and seeds. I'm going to eat avocados because that enables me to absorb enough A, D, E, and K so that I don't become deficient. True or false?
Yeah, I think that's ridiculous. It's simple to me, right? One D you should be getting from sunlight, right? I'm not even worried about it. But, look at, I like to look at vitamin A, right? If there are all these people that weren't eating high fat enough to absorb the vitamin A, all these people would be running around with blindness from corneal ulcers due to vitamin A deficiency. I have not met a single person with vitamin A deficiency and a corneal ulcer because of that, right? So I don't see this theoretical concern that people have, right? It's almost like they make that up to try and make it more complicated or to justify something. What are they trying to justify? Probably eating more fat. And I don't even care if you eat more fat, but don't do it because you're scared about vitamin A deficiency, right? Use fat to make your diet a little bit more palatable when you want to, have a little richer dish or have a richer dessert once in a while. But don't kid yourself and I'm doing this for health. I'm eating, a bucket of nuts every day because I got to do it for health reasons, right? That's not true. So to me, I look at it from that perspective. I also look at it from the common sense of the animals perspective, right? How many animals out there are just living off of grass, right? And they're eating all sorts of plant foods that are particularly low in fat. Now, plant foods, even when they're low in fat, still have fat. People are shocked when I tell them that bananas have saturated fat in them, right? All these foods have a little bit of fat in them. So even if you're eating no concentrated fat sources, you're still getting fat. And my guess is you're getting the perfect amount. You don't want too much. So these foods are so high in those vitamins that possibly your body doesn't want more than that, right? Your body's using that to regulate how much it's absorbing, right? Maybe that's a good thing. Every time we try to help our bodies out, we wind up causing problems downstream because we didn't think about the downstream effects. So you have all these animals, I go back to that are eating grass all day. They're not running around looking for a bucket of nuts to wash the grass down with because they're worried about getting the fat soluble vitamins. They're getting them. And because we know a little bit, it's almost dangerous now because we know a little bit to make it more confusing, a little bit more. People worry about this, that, and the other, when in fact, you eat your plant-based foods, you eat them as whole as possible, and you minimize or eliminate all the other stuff and you just live your life, right? And if people could just trust that and do it, you're golden.
I really love what you're saying. It reminds me a lot of what Colin Campbell wrote in his book, Whole, just looking at the bigger picture, the symphony of the food and how your body metabolizes it. It's beyond our comprehension. So just keeping it simple is quite logical.
Right. And anybody that tells you they understand that you got to eat this to do this to affect that in the body, they're implying that they know more than Mother Nature and they know more about your body than we really know right now. Mm-hmm. And every time we try to get involved with the body and sort of help it out, you wind up having some other effect that you had no idea was even going to be an issue. And sometimes multiple effects you had no idea. So again, one thing we know that is safe is eat whole plant foods and eat as much of them as possible or make them as much of your calories as possible.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's a great summary of the nutrition part of our conversation. Now, like Cyrus hinted at earlier, we'd like to talk a little bit more about some of the psychological aspects. So you've worked with thousands of patients over many years, and you've seen that sometimes there's a lot more to focus on than just diet. So can you share some of your experience in this area?
Yeah. So what I've spent more time on, particularly sort of later in my career now, is that diet is one key piece that people have gotten really wrong, and you can help make significant and very impactful changes, right? And if you take make these significant changes in your diet lifestyle, you can have this huge impact on disease. That's really empowering. That's really exciting. What I found though is that there's a lot of people out there that are struggling with issues that are beyond diet, or diet is a key piece of it. So, for example, we talked about something called the hands of joy, right? We think about it as like you have two hands here, and they're sort of in this optimal balance, and that's really the key, is balance. And I ask people, what's important to you? Is it eating really healthy, really important to you? What's at the base of it? What is the reason for being here, right? What is most important to you? And it all comes back down to sort of happiness and joy, right? Like that's what we want to go after. That's the ultimate currency. So when we came up with the hands of joy, we think about it as sort of the left hand is your internal world, and that comes up. There's sort of sleep, nutrition, activity, mind, body, and play. And those are all key areas of your internal world that you want to optimize. And depending on what's going on for you, you might put more of your energy in one area than another. To start with, for example, someone that's working 3 jobs and sleeping 2 hours a night, maybe talking about diet isn't the first thing they do. Maybe we got to figure out how to get them more sleep. I find that if you can't get the sleep right, it's hard to make a lot of other changes, and it's hard to make, and even if you make them, it's hard to sustain them for a long period of time. We got to get the sleep right. Or the mind body, if there's stress and anxiety and chronic pain, there's other things to talk about. So anyway, there's looking at the internal world, optimizing the internal world so that you can then facilitate connection, contribution, and growth. Those are to me, the 3 things that, or if you can connect, contribute, and grow with your external world, that's what's going to lead to happiness and joy. And the external world we talk about is your spouse or significant other, that relationship. There's a relationship with your kids, and then sort of that overall family unit. There's the relationship with your friends, and then the relationship with your spiritual relationship, your faith, whatever you want to interpret that as. And what we find is if you can help people optimize their internal world so they can facilitate that connection and contribution and growth with the external world, if you can help them get that balance, they're feeling joy. And that life is all about going out of balance and then trying to get back into balance. And to me, it's helping people whenever they're out of balance, giving them the resources, the support tools, and the skills to maintain or restore that balance. And that's what we've been spending a lot of time on now, is helping people identify obstacles to achieving that balance, and then coaching them through and facilitating that process for them. Does that make sense?
Yeah, actually, I think it makes a lot of sense, because it's almost like there's a priority, there's like a hierarchy. And, we're trying to talk to people about how they can change their diet and, maximize their insulin sensitivity and give themselves the best shot at reversing diabetes.
Right.
And I think what you're saying is that for some people, there's higher priorities, and, the conversation about diet kind of falls down when when the things on their mind are much more related to survival and making sure that on a daily basis they can feed their kids properly and they can make enough money, et cetera, et cetera. So,
right, and that to me it comes back to listening and connecting with each person. And a lot of people are coming to you guys specifically saying, hey, I got diabetes. How do I fix that? And you guys are that solution. If I can't tell you the number of times I've given out your website where I say, hey, if you need to reverse your diabetes, these are the guys to see, right? And then they're sort of, okay, well, they'll do that, or they'll say, hey, I'm struggling to go there. What's going on? And then it's sort of expanding that world and then helping them. A lot of people don't even realize that that's what is going to help them, achieve their joy and happiness in their world. So then they go and reverse their diabetes and they're like, well, why am I still not happy? My numbers are better, but I'm not happy. So I think that's sort of the next phase. But a lot of people can't be happy if they feel like junk all the time because their blood sugars are high and they got neuropathy and, their stomach's always hurting and they can't do the other stuff. So you got to fix their diabetes. And that's where you optimize that internal world to help them, because it's very hard to focus on relationships in the external world when your internal world feels terrible. So I think that's the way that I like to put it in perspective for people, and then help each person to integrate all that and help them get closer to that. And it's actually not achieving it that gives you the joy and happiness. It's just understanding it and heading in that direction that gives people the joy and happiness, which is what is pretty empowering and exciting.
Amen to that. I agree. Okay. So what if somebody comes up to you and you figure out over the course of time that they may be dealing with chronic stress or chronic anxiety or maybe chronic physical pain, right? And yeah, sure, they're living with diabetes and maybe they have heart disease and they're interested in, getting healthier. How would you, I bet you there's hundreds, if not thousands of people who are in that position right now listening to this interview. So what are those people supposed to do? What steps can they take to start moving in the right direction, like you were just saying?
Well, first off, I like to talk, like you talk about, sometimes we label things, people say, oh, that's someone else, that's not me, right? So like anxiety, right? Anxiety is one that people think of like, oh, I'm like this stress, worry, the stress case. But I think most people deal with anxiety to some level or another, right? Like the people that have to check their phone, like, 10 times an hour, or people that, if I don't get through all my emails for the day, it's just, I feel it. I got to do it. I got to, it's that drive, the social networking stuff where I gotta check my Facebook again. To me, that energy, that's when I talk about anxiety. I think most people, to some extent or another, have some level of anxiety that's motivating their behavior and their actions in life. And the idea is to sort of help them just get awareness of that. And that's the first thing, is to sort of do an inventory of everything. I say, okay, let's look at your internal and external world, and let's look at what you're doing that I call them behaviors that elevate, or are they behaviors that are addressing an anxiety, that are sort of responding to an anxiety. So for example, when something feels good, imagine you took a pair of really tight shoes and put them on your feet, right? That's going to hurt. And then you take off the tight shoes and all of a sudden your feet feel better. So that feels good. That's a pleasure sense, right? But that's not, to me, that's the same thing as when you do things to try and get rid of anxiety versus, hey, I'm going to eat healthy food and talk to my friends and spend time with my kids laughing. That's not getting rid of anxiety and making that feel good. That's actually doing things that elevate, right? Elevate your life, elevate your internal world, your energy, however you want to think about it. So it's trying to help people understand how much of their life is motivated by anxiety. A lot of the reasons they don't do the diet and lifestyle changes you guys recommend is because they have anxiety in one area or another that's making them say, well, I can't do this. This is going to be too big. This is going to be too scary. This is going to be too hard. So they're trying, rather than deal with the anxiety, they try to make themselves feel better by going away from the anxiety. And going away from the anxiety is sort of saying, okay, well, I'm not going to do that diet because, versus, oh, well, hey, we can actually help you through that anxiety. We can actually help you through those issues. So to me, it can help you in these specific areas, or it can be sort of a bigger thing. The average workaholic, I mean, it's not elevating their life. They're a workaholic because they have a lot of anxiety if they don't work to that extent, right? So again, I don't want to use the term, it's almost like, what is motivating your behavior? or what is motivating you not to do something that you know is health promoting, and then explore that more deeply. And then I can help them with what my biggest concern. I can look at them and say, well, your biggest issue right now is that you're about to go for bypass surgery and have a heart attack. What is your, I would really focus on your diet right now. Or I could say, hey, you know what? They'll tell me, well, I don't care about my diet right now, and I'd rather take medication. But, I've got all this mess with my kids, and I'm, not sleeping, and that's what I want to talk about first. Now, the people that come to see you self-select. They're like, whatever's going on in my life, I want to deal with diabetes with you right now. So that makes it very easy. So I wouldn't say that you guys have to focus on that, but I think for the people watching, sometimes it's helpful, it's empowering to think about, what you're doing is one key piece of the puzzle, but it's a bigger puzzle. And when you're ready to address that bigger puzzle, there's resources that can support you.
I really love everything you're saying here about focusing on the bigger picture. We all know this, what to do is we can just tell people, but actually doing it is difficult. And there are a lot of challenges involved. So hearing you talk about this through all the experience you have is really, really valuable. So thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today.
Yeah, no, glad to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, this is great, Matt. I feel like you have so many years of experience under your belt, plus you've worked with so many patients over the course of time that, tapping into, even just the tip of the iceberg here in your head and your experience is really helpful, not only for us, but also for people who are, are starting the lifestyle change process. So continue doing what you're doing. I mean, you're affecting change in ways that you may never even be able to tell, but we totally appreciate everything that you're doing. So thank you so much.
Yeah. And thanks for all that you guys are doing. Really great stuff.